March 1945. The German Reich is collapsing under the weight of Allied advances from both east and west. In a military airfield near Munich, surrounded by the snow-covered Bavarian landscape, a revolutionary aircraft sits in its hangar, representing the last technological hope of a dying regime. The Messerschmitt Me 262, the world's first operational jet fighter, gleams under the cold morning light. For Hauptmann Ernst Müller, a 32-year-old Luftwaffe pilot with over 2,000 flight hours, this machine represents both the pinnacle of German engineering and the futility of continuing a war already lost. His hands tremble slightly as he reads the orders that have just been handed to him, not from fear of flying, but from the weight of decisions he must make in the coming hours. If you're finding this story compelling, please subscribe to our channel and hit the like button to support more historical content like this. Ernst had joined the Luftwaffe in 1938, driven by a passion for aviation rather than political ideology. His father, a schoolteacher in Hamburg, had opposed the regime quietly, teaching Ernst to think critically even as the world around them descended into madness. Now, with Germany in ruins and his family's fate uncertain, Ernst found himself at a crossroads. The orders were clear. Fly the Me 262 to a secret base in the Alps, where remaining Luftwaffe forces were attempting to regroup. But Ernst knew the truth that many refused to accept. There would be no regrouping, no miraculous counteroffensive, no victory, only more death and destruction. The hangar was cold, and Ernst's breath formed small clouds in the frigid air as he walked around the aircraft. The Me 262 was beautiful in a utilitarian way, its sleek fuselage and twin Jumo engines representing a quantum leap in aviation technology. He ran his hand along the smooth metal surface, thinking about how this machine could have changed the course of the war if it had been deployed earlier, if resources hadn't been wasted on foolish strategic decisions, if the leadership hadn't been consumed by madness. But these were thoughts for historians, not for a pilot facing an impossible choice. Oberleutnant Klaus Weber approached from across the hangar, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. Klaus was 24, young enough to still believe in victory, or at least in duty. He had been assigned as Ernst's wingman for the mission, though there was only one Me 262 available. Klaus would follow in a conventional Bf 109, a fighter already obsolete compared to Allied aircraft now dominating the skies. Hauptmann, the weather report shows clearing skies to the south. We should leave within the hour, Klaus said, his voice carrying the crisp formality of military training. Ernst turned to face the younger pilot. Klaus, I need to speak with you honestly, man to man, not officer to subordinate. Klaus's expression shifted, uncertainty replacing military bearing. Sir? This war is over. You know it as well as I do. Flying south changes nothing except perhaps delaying the inevitable by a few days or weeks. I want you to think carefully about what you do next. You have a fiancée in Dresden, yes? Had, sir. Dresden was bombed in February. I received word last week. Anna is gone. Her entire family is gone. Klaus's voice broke slightly, the professional facade cracking. Ernst felt the familiar weight of grief that had become constant in these final months of war. I'm sorry, Klaus. Truly. All the more reason to survive this. All the more reason to make choices that lead to life, not more death. What are you suggesting, Hauptmann? Ernst lowered his voice, glancing around the hangar to ensure they were alone. I'm suggesting that when I take off in that aircraft, I may not be flying south, and I'm suggesting that whatever you see me do, you report that I followed orders exactly as given and that you lost sight of me in cloud cover. Klaus stared at him for a long moment, processing the implications. You intend to defect. I intend to survive. I intend to end my participation in this madness. The Americans are less than 100 kilometers west of here. The war will be over in weeks. What purpose does flying this machine to the Alps serve except to prolong suffering? It's treason, sir. Treason against what, Klaus? Against a regime that has destroyed our country? Against leaders who send children to die in the streets of Berlin with Panzerfausts in their hands? I took an oath to Germany, not to the destruction of Germany. Klaus was silent, his internal struggle visible on his young face. Finally, he spoke quietly. My father was arrested by the Gestapo in 1943 for speaking against the war. I never saw him again. I joined the Luftwaffe to protect my family, but I couldn't protect Anna. I couldn't protect anyone. What good is duty when everything we were supposed to protect is gone? Then you understand, Ernst said softly. Go home, Klaus, or surrender to the Americans when they arrive here, which will be soon. Tell them you're done fighting. Most of us are just men who got caught up in something beyond our control. The Americans will understand that. And you, sir, what will you do? Ernst looked back at the Me 262. I'm going to fly west. I'm going to land this aircraft at an American base and show them what our engineers created. Maybe it will save lives, maybe it will end the war a few days sooner, or maybe I'll be shot down before I cross the lines, but I won't use this machine to kill anyone else. I've dropped enough bombs, fired enough bullets, I'm done. Klaus extended his hand. Then I wish you luck, Hauptmann Miller. And I will report that you followed orders and that weather conditions caused us to lose contact. Ernst shook his hand firmly. Thank you, Klaus. Survive this. Find something to live for after the war. We'll need good men to rebuild. Within the hour, Ernst was strapped into the cockpit of the Me-262, running through pre-flight checks. The twin-jet engines whined to life with a sound unlike any piston engine he had ever flown. The power was extraordinary, the vibration different, the entire experience of piloting this aircraft unlike anything in his extensive career. He taxied to the runway, received clearance from the tower, and pushed the throttles forward. The acceleration was breathtaking. The Me-262 leaped forward, eating up runway at a rate that would have seemed impossible in a conventional fighter. Ernst pulled back on the stick, and the aircraft lifted effortlessly into the gray Bavarian sky. He climbed rapidly, banking westward, away from the assigned route, away from the dying Reich, toward uncertainty, but also toward the possibility of survival. As he gained altitude, Ernst could see the landscape of southern Germany spread below him. Towns and cities showed the scars of war, bomb craters and destroyed buildings visible even from this height. Columns of refugees clogged the roads, fleeing east to west, or simply wandering without clear destination. This was what remained of the empire that was supposed to last 1,000 years. 13 years of Nazi rule had brought Germany to complete ruin. Ernst checked his fuel gauge and calculated distance. He needed to find an American airfield quickly. Flying too far west risked encountering Allied fighters who would shoot him down on sight. Flying too slowly risked German anti-aircraft batteries that wouldn't hesitate to fire at any aircraft not positively identified as friendly. He was trapped between two armies, flying a machine that both sides would want for completely different reasons. The radio crackled with German communications, units reporting positions, requesting support, describing the chaos of retreat. Ernst switched it off. He didn't want to hear it anymore. He focused on flying, on the mechanics of keeping this revolutionary aircraft in the sky, on navigating by landmarks and compass toward American lines. After 20 minutes of flight, Ernst spotted what he was looking for. A captured German airfield now in American hands, identifiable by the star markings on aircraft visible on the ground and the configuration of anti-aircraft positions. He circled once, high enough to be out of range of small arms fire but visible to anyone watching. Then he lowered his landing gear, the universal signal of peaceful intentions, and began his approach. On the ground, the reaction was predictable chaos. Air raid sirens wailed, anti-aircraft crews scrambled to their positions, and pilots ran for their aircraft. No one had ever seen anything like the Me-262 in combat up close. The swept-wing design, the lack of propellers, the incredible speed, all marked this as something completely new and potentially very dangerous. Major Robert Harrison of the United States Army Air Forces stood outside the operations building, binoculars raised, watching the strange aircraft circle. "What the hell is that thing?" he muttered. "Sir, it's got to be one of those German jets we've been hearing about," said Lieutenant Tommy Chen, standing beside him. "Intelligence said they were operational, but we've never captured one intact." "Well, his gear is down. Either he's surrendering, or it's some kind of trick. Get every gun we have pointed at that runway. If he makes one wrong move, I want him blown out of the sky." Ernst lined up his final approach, hands steady on the controls despite the adrenaline surging through his system. He could see American soldiers running across the airfield, vehicles moving into position, gun barrels tracking his descent. One mistake, one misinterpreted movement, and he would be dead before he touched the ground. He reduced throttle, feeling the Me-262 slow, managing the different flight characteristics of jet engines compared to the piston engines he had flown for years. The wheels touched tarmac with a slight bounce. Ernst reduced power further, applied brakes gently, and brought the aircraft to a stop in the middle of the runway. He shut down both engines, the whine gradually decreasing to silence. For a moment, Ernst sat in the cockpit, hands still on the controls, breathing heavily. He had done it. He had crossed the line between one life and another, between war and whatever came after. American soldiers surrounded the aircraft within seconds, rifles pointed at the cockpit. Ernst slowly raised his hands above his head, making his intentions absolutely clear. He reached up carefully, slid the canopy back, and stood in the cockpit, hands still raised high. "I am Hauptmann Ernst Müller of the Luftwaffe," he called out in heavily accented but understandable English. "I surrender myself and this aircraft to American forces. I am unarmed. I wish to defect." Major Harrison approached cautiously, his sidearm drawn but not pointed directly at Ernst. "Climb down slowly. Keep your hands where I can see them." Ernst complied, moving carefully, very aware of how tense the situation was. Any sudden movement could result in gunfire. He climbed down from the wing and stood on the tarmac, hands still raised. American soldiers immediately grabbed him, searched him thoroughly, and zip-tied his hands behind his back. "Take him to interrogation," Harrison ordered, "and get a guard on that aircraft. Nobody touches it until intelligence gets here. This might be the most important thing we've captured in months." Ernst was led away to a small building at the edge of the airfield. The room they put him in was Spartan, just a table and 2 chairs, but it was warm and clean. After 15 minutes, Major Harrison entered along with another officer, a captain wearing intelligence insignia. "I'm Captain David Greenberg," the intelligence officer said, sitting across from Ernst. "I understand you speak English?" "Yes, I learned it in school before the war. My English is not perfect, but adequate." "Why did you defect?" Greenberg asked bluntly. Ernst considered his answer carefully. "Because the war is lost. Because I did not wish to die pointlessly. Because I have seen enough death and destruction. I am a pilot, not a fanatic. I joined the Luftwaffe to fly, not to serve a political ideology. That ideology has destroyed my country. I wanted no more part of it." "You realize you're giving us incredibly valuable intelligence? That aircraft you flew here represents technology we didn't know Germany possessed at this level of development." "I understand. Perhaps it will help end the war sooner. Perhaps it will save lives that would otherwise be lost. I flew bombers earlier in the war. I dropped bombs on England, on Russia. I cannot undo what I have done, but I can choose what I do from this moment forward." Greenberg studied Ernst's face for a long moment. "Were you a member of the Nazi Party?" "No. Membership was not required for Luftwaffe pilots, though it was encouraged. I avoided it by focusing entirely on flying duties and staying apolitical in discussions. It was a careful path to walk." "Did you participate in any war crimes?" "I flew military missions against military targets. I followed the laws of war as I understood them. I'm not proud of everything I did, but I committed no atrocities. I'm a soldier who fought for his country, rightly or wrongly. Now I wish to stop fighting." Major Harrison, who had been standing by the door, spoke up. "That aircraft you brought us, is it difficult to fly?" Ernst shook his head. "No more difficult than conventional aircraft, simply different. The jet engines respond differently to throttle inputs. The aircraft is faster and heavier than fighters you're used to, but any skilled pilot could learn to fly it with proper instruction." "And you'd be willing to provide that instruction, to help us understand the aircraft?" "Yes. I will answer any questions you have. I will help you understand the Me-262 completely. It is remarkable engineering, but engineering without the moral foundation to use it properly. Perhaps you can do better." The interrogation continued for hours, covering Ernst's entire military career, his knowledge of German aviation technology, his understanding of Luftwaffe tactics and organization. Greenberg and Harrison pressed him on details, testing his honesty, searching for inconsistencies. Ernst answered everything directly, holding nothing back. He had made his choice and would live with the consequences. That evening, Ernst was given a meal in a clean room with a bed. It was the first time in months he had felt safe enough to truly relax. He lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, processing everything that had happened. He thought about his family in Hamburg, wondering if they had survived the war, if he would ever see them again. He thought about Klaus Weber and hoped the young pilot had made the right choice. He thought about Anna, Klaus's fiancée, and the thousands of others whose lives had been cut short by the madness of total war. Over the following days, Ernst worked with American pilots and engineers, explaining the Me-262 systems, demonstrating its capabilities, answering endless technical questions. The Americans were astounded by the aircraft's performance. In test flights conducted by American pilots with Ernst's guidance, the Me-262 demonstrated clear superiority over any Allied fighter in speed and climb rate. Only its relatively short range and the scarcity of spare parts and fuel prevented it from being the decisive weapon Germany had hoped for. "If you had 100 of these operational in 1943, the air war would have been very different," one American pilot commented after a test flight. "Yes," Ernst agreed, "but we did not have them in 43. We wasted time and resources on foolish projects, on fighting among ourselves, on pursuing ideological purity instead of practical results. That is why Germany lost, not because we lacked courage or technology, but because we were led by madmen who made madness our national policy." News of Ernst's defection spread quickly through intelligence channels. The intact Me-262 was shipped to the United States for detailed study, where it would influence American jet aircraft development in the post-war years. Ernst himself became a valuable source of information on German aviation, providing insights that helped the Allies understand the full extent of German technological advances in the final years of the war. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, Ernst was still in American custody, though his status had evolved from prisoner to something more like a technical consultant. He learned that Hamburg had survived relatively intact, and that his family had lived through the war. The news brought tears of relief he had held back for years. In the months after the war, Ernst provided testimony for war crimes tribunals, not as a defendant, but as a witness, helping Allied investigators understand the structure of the Luftwaffe and the conduct of the air war. He was careful to be honest about German actions, neither minimizing nor exaggerating, simply providing factual information that helped establish historical truth. Major Harrison visited him one day in June, carrying news. Hauptmann Miller, or I suppose just Ernst now since your military career is over, I thought you'd want to know. We tracked down Oberleutnant Klaus Weber. He surrendered to American forces at your old airfield 3 days after you left. He's alive and well. He told us you saved his life by encouraging him not to follow orders to fly south. Ernst felt a wave of relief wash over him. Thank you for telling me. Klaus was a good young man caught up in terrible circumstances. What will happen to him? Well, he'll be processed like thousands of other German POWs. Screened for war crimes, which he clearly didn't commit, then released to go home and rebuild his life. The same will happen to you, eventually. You're not a criminal, Ernst. You're a pilot who made the right choice at the right time. I made the only choice I could live with, Ernst corrected quietly. Whether it was right or wrong, history will judge. Ernst Miller remained in the United States after his release, working as an aviation consultant and later as a test pilot for American aerospace companies. He never returned to Germany permanently, though he visited his family regularly. The memories of what he had witnessed and participated in during the war stayed with him, shaping his perspective on nationalism, duty, and the individual's responsibility to refuse immoral orders. The Me-262 he delivered to American forces became one of the most studied German aircraft of the war. Its revolutionary design influenced the development of American jet fighters, contributing to technological advances that would dominate the Cold War era. In an indirect way, Ernst's decision to defect had accelerated American aviation progress by years. Years later, when asked by historians about his decision to defect, Ernst always gave the same answer. I was not a hero. I was simply a man who decided he had participated in enough destruction. The Me-262 represented the pinnacle of German engineering, but what good is engineering in service of evil? I gave that aircraft to people who, I hoped, would use such technology more wisely. Whether they did or not, I cannot say, but I know that I chose life over death, peace over war, and rebuilding over destruction. That was enough for me. In the decades after the war, Ernst became an advocate for international cooperation in aviation, arguing that technology should bring people together rather than drive them apart. He wrote extensively about his experiences, always emphasizing the human cost of war and the importance of individual moral choice, even in circumstances that seem to demand obedience. The question of whether Ernst Miller was a traitor or a man of conscience was debated in Germany for years. Some viewed his defection as betrayal, arguing that soldiers must remain loyal regardless of circumstances. Others saw him as someone who recognized when duty to humanity superseded duty to a particular regime. Ernst himself never claimed to be either hero or villain, simply a man who made a choice he could live with. When Ernst died in 1998 at the age of 85, his obituary in major newspapers described him as the German pilot who delivered the Me-262 to America, and in doing so helped end the war and advance aviation technology. At his funeral, attended by both German and American aviation pioneers, a speaker noted that Ernst's true legacy was not the aircraft he delivered, but the moral courage he demonstrated in choosing conscience over orders, humanity over nationalism, and peace over continued war. The Me-262, he flew that March day in 1945, sits now in a museum, a testament to German engineering and to the complex choices individuals faced in the final days of the Second World War. Beside it, a plaque tells Ernst Miller's story, reminding visitors that technology is neutral, that its use for good or evil depends on human choices, and that sometimes the most important act of courage is knowing when to stop fighting.